Hey everyone, this is Tommy Lackey with PowerInvesting.com. Today is Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, and we're going to put a sector under the microscope. Today we're going to take a look at the communication services sector. And let me kind of give you an idea of kind of why I chose this and how I got there. First, we're looking at our universe chart, RSI chart, and it's trying to move its way back over 60 here, back into a bull range after a brief respite below. If we get rejected here, we might have a little more sideways to down in this correction. However, a lot of the under the hood type stuff with the breadth and things like that have been improving well. As we move down to the breadth chart, it really has come off the lows very well. We're not seeing a lot of lagging. And markets are trying to perform on both our short, intermediate, and long-term breadth. So we want to start looking for sectors that are trying to come out early. A lot of times there's two ways people will look at that. A lot of people will tell you that it's going to be the sectors that are leading are the ones that are going to be the next leaders in the next leg. They're going to keep leading. One thing we find a lot of times, if there's someone who didn't participate a lot in one leg, but it starts to come out early in the next leg, we might want to look a little closer. And that's kind of where we are with communication services. As I pull down here to our equal weight sector rankings, here you can see communication services is pretty much right in the middle right now, which is where I like it with a 64. But it's moved up 19 points over the last 5 trading days and 55 points over the last 21 trading days. What that tells me is it just hadn't been participating for a while. However, it's starting to really get back in the game. As you can see, back at the beginning of the quarter, it was a 64, and that was actually coming off some highs at the end of last year. Dropped all the way down to a 9 and has moved back up to that 64. And overall, we don't have huge quarterly earnings. It's one of the lower ones on our page, but we're starting to see over the last week things pop back up and perform for us. So when we look here, we want to kind of go into the communication services page, which I've already opened up. And we first start with the RSI chart there. I kind of start with that on everything. And as you look at this chart zoomed in, which is the way it would typically open, you can see that we're in about a 4-month base so far since the mid-December, almost 5-month base now that we're working on. That's basically just breaking out of the upside. As you can see here, the previous highs right before the end of the year that we saw as a closing high I marked, and we've had 2 closes above it and the very next day reversed and failed. I don't move my lines up with those. I keep this original line because the buyers could not hold it above those levels, so that makes the original line, in my opinion, more significant. And as you can see here to the right, it held very well until just recently. So this gives us one we want to look at for that very reason. It's starting to break out ahead a little bit of the major the power universe, and also some of the other major indexes. As well as this RSI is one of the one leading us and is already in a new bull range after basically being in more of a bear range or sideways range type action for quite a while. The only breakdown came right here towards the end, right before this kind of launched off these lows. A lot of good momentum signs there in communication services. The breadth did kind of the same thing. If we kind of zoom out a little bit and kind of look at how this breadth came up off those lows, since mid-April, the breadth here has been very strong comparing to the markets and absolute values. Its McClellan oscillator crossed at April 24th, when ours just the major universe just crossed a couple of days ago. So it's definitely been leading from a breadth standpoint off these lows. The news highs have been picking up nicely. We still need a little work on these 63-day new highs, but considering we're just making the breakout now, that makes some sense. And so from there, we work our way down to the relative comparative chart, which basically all of these are turning up versus the universe, the SPY, the QQQ, and the IWM. However, it is early. So let's not get too expectant that these are going to be running away yet. Like I said, the breadth, things like that, a lot of times we'll pick up our signals early, and then we watch it develop in the relative comparative. Now, other than just the sector level, we break it down into the subsector levels. Here, it's a pretty distinct difference in kind of how the returns are going. We have the interactive media and entertainment returning real well over the last month and the last week, and even the last quarter. So it's really been the one that's held up the most in this particular sector. Then media and entertainment has started to perk up some recently and has held up okay over the last quarter. And then our only negative is telecom. Telecom tends to be a more defensive play, so it's something we would see perform more if we expected the markets to do worse. We also have an ETF table that allows us to kind of research through and see which ETFs are leading. Right now it's some gaming, ProShares on demand, and then global communication services. However, the regular, just basic U.S. diversified like VOX and FCOM and XLC, all of these are not up in the leading groups. It takes a little more specialization here. Again, a lot of that has to do more with the interactive media stuff versus the overall, which we'll see in a minute. And at the bottom, we have our relative strength rankings. And you can see that we've had some leaders that have some really big monthly moves or quarterly moves here that might make them a little bit out of line. It might not. It's something we need to look at each chart now once we see the rankings and decide, do we want things that have already been strong, or do we want to sort it by the RS movers and see who's moving at this point in the game? A lot of times I like the RS movers better, but when you're at something that's been this depressed for this long and coming out of a large base, a lot of times these leaders in these particular sectors can still have a good ways to go. You might not buy them today, but it might give you the opportunity to watch it for a few days, find a good spot if it pulls back or if it gets moved sideways a little bit. So now let's drill down a little bit into the subsectors. We're going to start with the leader, which is interactive media and entertainment. As you can see, this particular sector chart is already leaving its breakout zone. You can see right here, it had a lower level, and then we had some previous highs up here that it's just moved out of the last 2 days. Similar to communication services as a whole, interactive media and entertainment, when you pull out on the chart, you can see there's a lot of room to the upside if it breaks out of this particular level and can hold above it. This is a long-term, almost a 2-year base that has been making higher lows for a year and a half. So as a technical standpoint, the strength has been building for a while. This is not something all that new, but it really has not been able to work out of that long base until just now. Gives it a long runway and a lot of time to get there, so don't expect the entire move to happen in the next week. When you look at the breadth, though, you can see off these lows in April, the breadth here has really strengthened up and stayed strong in this particular sector. It was down yesterday, even though the price was up a little bit, but this is something for us to continue to watch, that after a long stint of underperformance here, we're starting to see breadth numbers pop back up towards the high before the major power universe equal weight index does. So again, kind of ahead of the rest of some of the markets. Now with this one, you can see its relative comparatives already turned up pretty well here on the edges. Flattened out yesterday, but it's been going up for about 3 weeks against the universe, the communication services index as a whole that we run, SPY, QQQ, and IWM. So it's outperforming everything already. This is your leader by far, and there's just really no doubt. Some big movers in here, EBER, SE, BILI already, DOYU, but these have some big downtrends that they're trying to come off and work out of. Then you have companies like Snap that really aren't trying to come out of a big downtrend, but if you take a look at this chart real quick, you can tell it gapped down on the last earning, gapped up on this one a week or two ago, and now it's trying to consolidate right back at these highs. If it clears this 1750 to 1770 level, as we can see over here on the right on the weekly chart, it's got so much room to move and plenty of time to get there. So this is something that you can kind of watch get on, and you might have a big move out of here trying to fill up some of this space. 24, probably about 24 would be next. More realistically would be about 29 would be the next steep resistance I would see if it clears that 1750 level. Like I said, that's a really big move from here. So now we go from communication services. Again, you can go through this level in interactive media over its RS tables, or you can go back and we can do it on this major communication services down here and look at everything in the space when you're ready to kind of dig in and find the areas and make your trade plans. The next is media and entertainment. It's kind of stuck in the middle of the other two. It's not performing nearly as bad as telecom, but it's also not screaming up there like interactive media. However, its RSI chart is also nearing another breakout or a breakout. Again, long term, it's a big base, but short term, it's trying to come out of this area, but just not there yet. Interactive media is really the leader. It's still a space, though, you can watch for the breadth and how it progresses. And then down in the bottom, once we get to the, sorry for that scrolling, but once we get down here to the bottom to the relative strength list, again, we can go through and find the names. You know, CLDX is up 133%. That might not be the one we want to jump on first, but STGW is not up that much. PLTK, some smaller names. You know, Pair is actually down. Paramount Global. But it's just a matter of going through the charts once we get here and decide, like I said, whether you want to be in the strongest names or the up-and-coming names. You know, this one, even though it's moved up a lot over the last quarter, it still looks like it could be working out of kind of a cup and handle and have some plenty of room to the upside, considering the weekly RSI is not overbought, nor is the daily. It's going into earnings right now, so I'm not sure I'd jump on ahead of it unless you have a really good designed options play, low risk or defined risk. But again, that's one of the ones that's been up the most, and it really doesn't look that bad here on the chart perspective. So make sure you don't go just by returns. You actually look at these charts and see which ones, once you've decided what your fishing lane is going to be. And then finally, we have telecom. In telecom here, not performing near as well as the other two from the returns basis, and you can see it right here on the chart. It's still lagging those previous highs. But something I'll make sure I remind you, again, I said this is more defensive play. As you can see, it went down a while back, but it's come up a lot over the last year or so, and it's almost back towards previous highs that it had back in October of 2021. Again, more of a defensive nature. It's not going to move down nearly as far when things get hit hard a lot of times, but it's also not going to have as much velocity on the way back up. So if you're expecting markets to be tough, this might be a place for you to invest for now. If you're not, if you think we're just in a shorter term correction and things are going to improve, then I might stick with the interactive media and entertainment side of things. But again, all of these different have leaders. All these different subsectors have leaders in them that are performing. So if you want to be in a specific space, go down here, find your relative strength leaders. Band has come up a tremendous amount. It's up 61% over the last quarter. And when you go over here and you look at this weekly chart on the right, it's not like this is a chart that looks like it's ran through the roof. This is a chart that's just now in a good zone for the weekly RSI. It's on nitrous in the weekly. The daily just got back into a daily RSI bull range. Now it is coming down today, maybe coming back to test this gap, but if it holds in this 2070 to 2050 range and can start working its way back up, might be a good opportunity to head up at least to the 28 range, breaks out of there, and there's no telling how high or where it can go. Again, these are some names in communication services that have been out of favor for not just 2 to 3 years, sometimes 4 years in some of these, because they started and they had one of the rougher spaces in the downturn in 21, from early 21 on. So be paying attention and realizing, even though they might have made some really big moves, they might still have some good range left to the upside, just trying to build the right side of these particular charts. Big downtrends a lot of times have a lot of room to retrace once the particular areas come back in favor if it's a viable company. And with a lot of these in this space, I think that's exactly what we're talking about. So we're going to go back to our main, again, communication services, run through the page, do some of your own digging to see if you think this is an area that's right for you. But this should give you a good idea of what we're seeing right now, where we're looking, and hopefully this can help you make better decisions with your trading. Again, thanks for listening and watching, and I hope everybody has a great day. Trade them well.